Do you dip in and out of streaming subscription services? This is TV Plus Talk on MacVoices.
Hello, welcome to TV Plus Talk. I'm Charlotte Henry, and he is Chuck Joyner. Hello.
I am Charlotte. Good to see you as always. Glad we're sort of getting back on schedule with TV Plus Talk.
Yeah, nice. Well, I'm glad as well because there's a lot to talk about, lots of stuff to watch, lots of things to talk about. There's a lot of discussion about Apple TV Plus at the moment and the subscription world in general. So yes, let's get to it. You and I, it's interesting. People might not believe us, but we do actually plan this show. And when we were doing it, we came both sort of sending each other articles very much relating to the same topic. And we seem to sort of be in a quote unquote peak TV, peak streaming space. Now, we've been having these conversations for a while, if we're honest, haven't we, Chuck? But there's some real data that is showing, putting some substance behind the stories, right? I wrote about it for my newsletter the week before you're seeing this. I called it Streaming Fatigue is Real. And that was based on some data generated by CableTV.com, written up by Olivia Bono. News then sent me a New York Times story by John Coblin, which sort of builds on the same thing, and some data from Antenna. He was mostly focused on sort of people changing their subscription and bouncing around their subscription services, right? So we'll start, if you don't mind, with the CableTV.com story, because it has a very distinct Apple TV Plus angle. And that is that it is the 1,000 Americans that they conducted in this poll, which seemed to be, it's a small sample size, but they seem to weight it and do stuff properly. Apple TV Plus was the service that Americans have the highest negative opinion of. It was at 47% negative opinion for Apple TV Plus talk. And we should say that Netflix, and this will be another theme we return to, Netflix was the most positively received. Only 22% had a negative opinion of it. And as I was thinking of this, I was thinking, I know what Chuck's answer is going to be. He's going to say it all depends on what you're interested in and what shows you want to watch. But if I was the people behind TV Plus, I'd be a little bit despondent at seeing these kind of numbers at this kind of publication.
You're right to some degree. You had my response. You're locked in. I also
it's almost
think,
like we know each other well.
Yeah, really. But I also think part of it is that Apple TV Plus is not publicizing, their content, both the new content and the legacy content, as well as some of the others.
I mean, how many times are you and I going to have to say, why don't they promote this stuff? Why are they so bad at PR?
Yeah, that to me is, I think is, I'm not sure about it, that there's a negative impression. I think there's just almost an out of sight, out of mind lack of impression. I know you're big into sports. I know there have been some really terrific sports documentaries on there that I've either heard about only through you or by sheer accident.
Yeah.
And so, I say, wow, you're going for the big blockbusters, but those are the kind of things that are going to pull people in. I mean, there was one, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure there was a Steph Curry documentary. And, I would have thought people would have eaten that up if they knew about it.
Yeah, they tried to do their version of The Last Dance type of thing.
Yeah. So, I think that's where the criticism is. I find it hard to believe that it is in the content when I see Apple TV Plus shows showing up constantly in the streamers' top 10 every week.
There's a couple of really interesting points there. So first of all, it's called Stephen Curry Underrated. Is the show you were thinking of. You're right, I think, that some people like Apple TV Plus shows when they do eventually find them. I think that's a very reasonable point. I think when I hear about people talk about a negative opinion of TV Plus, what it makes me think of is that people turn it on and just don't think there is enough stuff there. That to me is what we're talking about.
Yeah, and this feels like you're about to I don't want to segue too early into the other piece,
No,
but
no, let's stick to it. But yes.
yeah, yeah, but that said, I feel like if you just people are spending less more money on services that maybe they don't watch all the time. And so, unless you're intentional about Apple TV and keeping up with what's there, you may have that perception that, well, there's really not anything there for me. And yet, when I look at my to watch list, I've probably got at least as many, if not more, Apple TV Plus shows on that list than any other single service.
Yeah. It just strikes me that people are thinking, well, there's not that much. And it seems pretty clear to me, and I don't want to be too trite about this, but it seems clear to me that Apple cannot dine out on Ted Lasso anymore. People still think of it, in my opinion, and I know you and I are not like this, but I think people still think of it as the Ted Lasso place, and Ted Lasso's finished. I just think it came at a time where people were like, this is one service too many for me. I'm done now. It's just, I think there's a lot of things going into this. I mean, I completely agree with you that if people spent time with TV Plus, they would find stuff they like on there. As you and I have said before, there's great sci-fi. Apple seems to have made a really good space for itself in the sci-fi space. Sports documentaries, you're right. Not quite enough comedies for me, but the comedies that have been on there have been very good. I always talk about Shrinking and Mythic Quest, both of which I love. And while we're talking about this, I'm very excited that I saw Rob McElhenney, I'm sure I've said that wrong, talking about season 4 of Mythic Quest being shot. So we might see that before not too long, which I'm very excited about. But yeah, it's just interesting. And in this cabletv.com article, the author, Olivia Bono, points out that there's cancellations on all services, which is generally playing into perception of negativity and frustration amongst consumers. And one of the shows she cites was Schmigadoon being cancelled, which was that kind of musical comedy that was pretty popular. I think people who found it liked it. Our mutual friend Kelly Gamont was a big fan, I believe. And, when shows like that go, it gives other people another excuse to cancel, doesn't it?
It does, Charlotte. And, there are a million reasons shows get canceled. I'm not making any excuses.
Sure.
Because I've had shows on all the streaming services that I was really into, and it's like, you mean you're canceling this? When the series, well, yeah, and even when you didn't have like a logical ending point, you're just pulling the plug right out of the wall. I get a bit frustrated with that. But on the other hand, everybody does it. Somewhere there are executives making decisions that this is not worth the investment. So I don't know. I'm not a TV executive. I don't know how you measure that and where the breaking point is. But boy, sometimes it just seems stupid.
Yeah. So some of the shows that is cited in this are Grease, Rise of the Pink Ladies on Paramount Plus, Our Flag Means Death on Max, and Willow on Disney Plus as well. So again, shows where like people were going to like them, and just take a step back from TV Plus for a moment. 36% of respondents says streaming services are becoming less worth it. 30% think less of streaming services because of password sharing crackdowns. 34% say streaming services aren't worth it anymore, and 15% have a negative opinion of streaming services. I discussed all this, by the way, on the Daily Tech News show. So I had a conversation there with Nika Montford and Sarah Lane about all this. So you can dive back into that if you want to look at the kind of broad stroke story. But there is an Apple TV Plus story here, isn't there? What do you think they would have to do then? I guess this is the question. And if we answer it, by the way, we're going to make a fortune. So think carefully. We're going to be really rich. What could Apple TV Plus do you think, to shift that negative opinion? Your points about marketing are well made, but what else do we think?
Beyond marketing, I'm not sure, except maybe a focused target marketing that if you produce a sci-fi show, that you really push it through sci-fi communication channels, not the Sci-Fi Channel. Sure. That if you're doing sports, that made the Steph Curry uh, documentary,
Mm.
that you take that and promote that much more through the basketball channels. Now, I
Yeah.
don't know if that means banner ads or, interviews or what, but think about the way that the networks and a lot of more mainstream things market. And my perception, and I am not a big TV watcher in this style, but my
Mm.
perception is that a lot of times the stars show up on the late night shows here in the U.S., on the early morning shows in the U.S. to talk about, oh, I've got this great new series, I've got this great new thing. I don't feel like I see that with the Apple TV Plus stories or shows, excuse me. So,
Not
is
many now
that,
you mention it.
yeah, so is that a missed opportunity? Or but when you were talking earlier, I thought about one other thing, and we've constantly talked about the quality part of Apple TV Plus.
Hmm.
Think about Apple TV, excuse me. Think about Apple's computer hardware product mix.
Hmm.
They don't try to hit every single category. They try to pick categories and develop quality products in those categories, and
Yeah.
then work them. And I'm not sure that approach may not be spilling over to Apple TV Plus, and I'm not sure it's as effective with the competition landscape, with the lack of loyalty, the Apple fan base loyalty. They just may need to shift a little bit, but it's just get the word out that these are some great shows that are worth watching.
I mean, it's such an interesting point because you mentioned sports documentaries. So there's one that I started called The War for Football, Super League, The War for Football, which is a 4-part documentary series about the death, basically, of the European Super League idea. It's really great. Like, it's really interesting. But it's sort of disappeared in the back and beyond of Apple TV Plus. I've talked to you before about Out on TV, the documentary there about LGBT people on television and the evolution of that. I think it's another 4-part series with some amazing people on it. Almost nobody knows about it, and it's hidden in the depths of TV Plus. And I do think they have the. I sort of don't want to, as I say, overwork the point, but I do think they have a problem. They're just seen as the Ted Lasso streaming service. I think Ted
No,
Lasso was almost too big a success for them.
Yeah, it mixed blessing. I mean, it definitely put them on the map, but it also, you get that. What do they call it with actors? They can't get away from the character.
Typecast.
Typecast. Thank you. Yes, I want to mention another sports documentary, sort of sports documentary that I caught, and I thoroughly enjoyed. I don't know if you've seen it. It was the Boris Becker.
Oh,
Boom
no.
Boom, the world versus Boris Becker. I
An
had no
interesting
I
character to have TV about.
Yeah, and I had no idea about 90% of what happened with Boris, and I'm sure not going to spoil it here. But I thoroughly enjoyed it, and it's like, why did this not get more press? Why do not more
Yeah.
people not know about it?
Your point really got me thinking when you said they're sort of giving the hardware version of Apple the same treat. They're giving to TV Plus the same treatment as they give the hardware. Sort of just assuming people are going to come to it, right? Oh, we've got a new iPhone. Obviously, people are going to buy a new iPhone. We've got a new Mac. People want a new Mac. And they're the insurgents in this space. They kind of need to start acting like it. But I still go back to this fundamental quantity problem. And I think that must be playing into this negative perception. I think people turn it on and just don't find enough stuff. And that might just be something as simple as the TV app isn't recommending them the right stuff.
And I think, Charlotte, it's interesting because a couple shows ago.
Sorry to interrupt, but because there is stuff there on TV Plus.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
We've long gone past the point where people say there's only 3 things on there. There is stuff there.
But a few shows back, if I remember correctly, you pointed out that there are things there that nobody knows about, but we have this weird split. You had stated, I think, that some of the most watched shows on streaming, not just Apple TV Plus, but streaming, and pretty much all of them were reruns. and reruns from not just years back, but a lot of years back, as
Very much so.
opposed to, so we have this weird schism of folks who are saying, well, you're not giving me enough new stuff. You're not giving me enough new stuff. Yet they're seeking out the comfort of, those things that they remember well, or that I sometimes wonder if they just put these things on in the background. And I'm not going to slam anybody's series, but there's some series that just go on and on forever. They're the same plot every single week. I feel like people might put them on just as wallpaper in the background.
Yeah, oh, I'm sure there is a bit of that. How many more times can you cycle through Friends? I'm sure there is a lot of that going on. Yeah.
Yeah. So, so what is important? Is it the back catalog for the comfort factor, or is it the folks or the new content that allegedly people will be talking about, tomorrow at the office or wherever you work or on your social media or whatever? I don't know what the answer is to serve both masters.
Yeah, well, and I think this brings us sort of nicely into the next thing we want to discuss. But as I say, in this survey, Netflix is the most popular. It's the service that percentage of Americans with a negative opinion is the smallest numbers, just 22%. Interesting, Hulu was just behind it on 24%. Anyway, and then this article by John Coblin that you flagged up was also talking about Netflix, and basically there is this idea in all the reading I do on this space that Netflix is the one thing that people will just not get rid of. For whatever reason, they have Netflix plus other stuff. And I think some of that relates to the catalogue point you've just said. Some of it is just our habit that whatever, it's like when people used to have a newspaper delivered, they had the newspaper they always got and then whatever. And I feel like Netflix is in that space of it's just the one thing people always keep.
But I wonder, as if the economy continues to tighten, the global economy, not just in the U.S., I wonder how Netflix will fare, unless people are looking for that comfort thing.
And I also think there's only so many times they can keep pushing up prices and, all that stuff. But it is interesting that Netflix seems to hold this place that nowhere else can get to. Maybe Amazon Prime Video is close to it because you get Amazon Prime with Prime Video. It's sort of it's one subscription to rule them all kind of thing. But in pure streaming play, it's Netflix that seems to be the sort of anchor for everyone. And Apple TV Plus is just not getting anywhere close, is it?
But don't you think that there's a familiarity factor there, since Netflix was sort of first in?
Oh, I 100% think that's exactly what's going on.
So I think people are comfortable with it, and it's like, yeah, there's always something I can find on here if I want something to watch.
Totally.
But your point about the price, you keep jacking it up, and people are going to start looking other places, and there are plenty of other places to look.
I think it's absolutely first mover advantage for Netflix. I also think it's catalog advantage. I think it's the fact that Netflix, when we think of searching on the web, we say Google it. I think when people say, is it available on streaming? And lots of people say, is it on Netflix? That what they mean is, can you stream it anywhere? But they're talking about Netflix.
Great
they
point.
Use Netflix as the sort of replacement word in that context.
Yeah, great point. Well, God, let's go back a little farther and I'll show my age. I won't show yours. But how many people thought that AOL was the internet? How many people now think Facebook is the internet?
Right.
So yeah, there's that thing of I find something I'm comfortable with. It gives me maybe everything I think I want. And so I'm not going to look any farther.
The really interesting point in this New York Times piece, it was reflected in the cabletv.com data as well, is that people are increasingly happy to mix and match. They don't just, unlike your cable bundle where you just keep it all month, people are happy to go, I've watched this on Peacock and now I'm cancelling Peacock. I finished Slow Horses on Apple TV Plus, so I'm cancelling Apple TV Plus until the next morning show season comes out, whatever. People seem to be much, much more comfortable doing that.
Sure, I think they have to be, given the prices. If you start stacking up Netflix, or forget Netflix. Just start stacking up 3 or 4 services, and look at the amount of money you're putting out for that each month. Balance that against the number of hours of TV you're watching, and at some point, you're going to say, you know what? I think I don't need this for this month, or I think I'll just wait and binge that after I've finished binging this. And so it's sort of an automatic way to save money if you're not using that service, or you can put off watching that particular service's offerings until your next little binge session.
Yeah, I think that's totally right. And it's just interesting that people are comfortable now with and companies have made it, quite rightly, easy enough to cancel these subscriptions that people are comfortable enough bouncing around. And I wonder if in some ways it helps the company, because I think there is evidence that if you make a subscription easy to cancel, people are happier to take it out. By the way, I don't know if I've ever told you this. When I am world ruler, one of the first things I'm going to do is ban any company that allows you to buy a subscription online, but you have to phone to cancel it.
You have my vote for world ruler.
Thank you. Wonderful.
Right
Let's
there.
go.
Yes, we have 2 now.
Yes, exactly. But sincerely, I think the ease in which you can cancel subscriptions is both, as you put earlier, a mixed blessing. I think it means people are happier and more comfortable taking out those subscriptions, but obviously it means they feel more able to bounce around as well.
You're probably going to hate this example, but because
perfect, go.
But forget the pandemic for a minute. Let's go back to pre-pandemic.
I've tried to.
Yes, I think there was a group of people that they would go to the movies every weekend because it was just the thing to do. It didn't matter what was playing. They just wanted to see what was on. Yeah, and they'd go, and even if it was something they weren't really interested in. The pandemic, I think, has made people more selective about going back to the movie theater, even though there's really no reason to at this point, because there's no evidence that sitting in a movie theater is going to make you sick. But they're hesitant to go back. But that it's more dangerous than anywhere else indoors or whatever. Yeah, and so but they got out of the habit and they became a little more selective, and they say, well, maybe I'll just wait for the next, Tom Cruise's next movie, and not try some of these others. And I think there's evidence that we saw with that with some of the blockbuster Apple films that really, and Argyle's one I had said I wanted to bring up. We'll talk about that in a minute. Argyle was trashed at the at the theaters, and people were like, no, who wants this? And yet it's leading in on some of the streaming services now, or excuse me, on Apple TV Plus as something that is really worth watching. So how do you there's a people factor here, not just a programming factor, that I think we're still wrestling with.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely true. I think habit is the key thing. And also, people got to the point where they're like, actually, my local multiplex cinema is really not a very nice experience. The food and drink is expensive, the toilets are horrible, and someone next to me is on their phone throughout the movie, and it's really ruining it for me. I can sit in my nice home on my big television and watch it anyway on a service I already pay for.
Yep.
And that clearly happened as well.
And that brings up a really interesting point. Think of the price of 50, 60, 70, 80-inch TVs that have gone through the floor. So that you can put a theater size. No, maybe not. That's an exaggeration. But you can put from the sofa to the screen, you can put something that rivals your theater and not have all those problems and not have to eat burned popcorn.
And sound can be pretty decent, and most people are less fussy than I would suggest you and I are about those kind of things. So yeah, it's a huge problem. But back to this sort of churn point, I think it plays into what you're talking about, because if there's a movie on a streaming service that you want to watch, people will happily, I would imagine, take out a streaming service for a month for cost of a cinema ticket, watch the movie, maybe check out a couple of other things on the service, and then maybe disband the service.
Sure.
There's a very interesting example which does relate to Apple, and I'll make the awkward, route through there in a minute. So Peacock, as you know, had an NFL playoff game exclusively on the streaming service. First time a game had ever been exclusive to streaming. It got lots of people in, and a lot of them stayed. Millions were in, and millions stayed. They did a 30-year half-price deal, and they basically managed to keep a lot of those people because of this draw of this one live sporting event. Now, Apple has sporting events. We've talked about it before. It hasn't quite gone for the blockbuster sporting events that might make people go, oh, damn, I've really got to take out a TV Plus subscription.
Yep.
Friday Night Baseball is one thing, but there are, as I've estimated it, and I'm a baseball fan, so I know that there are 3 million baseball matches each season. And so missing one on a Friday night for most people is kind of okay, right? Because there's so many matches in the season to watch.
I bow to your baseball fandom, because I am not.
Oh, if you look, it's officially 3 trillion matches a season.
Okay, well, it just went up. It's like interest.
Yeah. But whereas obviously there's only one, an NFL playoff match is an NFL playoff match. And it seemed to be a great way to get people through the door for Peacock. And I'm not sure Apple has many of those offers.
I would agree with you. But here we go again. Apple is not big on that kind of one-time hit, flash, boom thing. They want messy, and they want that consistency. They want Friday Night Baseball. They want that consistency. They constantly play the long game. They don't always win at the long game, but they kind of seldom just completely fall flat on the long game. And so, once again, we just, TV Plus Talk just celebrated a year. Okay, how old is Apple TV Plus? I'm not even sure. 4. Okay, so 4
or 5 years. It was November 2019, wasn't it?
4 or 5 years. 4 or 5 years, and a couple of those were pandemic, which again is a double-edged sword.
Should have really helped.
Well, it did, but we're right back to it. Could they at that point, did they have enough deep catalog to keep people?
No, probably not. That's
so
true.
We have all these weird factors that you and I discuss. I seldom hear discussed other places, because other places seem to be looking for just a quick answer, and then it's great or it's trash. It's black or it's white. And I think there are a lot of deeper things going on here, and in the bigger world of streaming too, that are affecting how it all plays out.
Yeah, I mean, this is, of course, why everyone should subscribe to TV Plus Talk, tell their friends about it, subscribe to both The Edition and MacVoices, obviously.
Without question, yeah.
Are you a chopper and a changer with your streaming services?
Excuse me? A what?
Do you go from cancel 1 month, take something out for another month, chop and change like that?
Yeah. Well, Charlotte, the way I look at it, and I'm probably not don't look at it the way the average person does, but I've really cut back on my TV watching. But more importantly, I sort of developed an entertainment budget. And one of the components of that budget is, what am I spending for cable, or to access broadcast, or for streaming services? And when I look at it versus the value I get out of it, it's like, yeah, I'd much rather say I'm going to binge this show or 2 shows on a service, and then move on to something else. Whether I keep the service and move on to a couple other shows, or switch services and play catch up. The only exception, and I'll admit it, the only exception for that for me is Paramount and Star Trek. That's something, that's my treat. I really want that as soon as I can get it. But beyond that,
and also it's that's all about the catalogue as well. I'm not a particular chop and changer. I some of that is because I tend to often take out an annual subscription because it's better value. Often, you often get basically 12 months for the price of 10 kind of thing. I'm also not sure I'm organised enough to sort it. But so I'm not a particular chopper and changer, but I would probably save lots of money if I did do that. Go on then. Argyle. Tell me about it.
I haven't watched it, but I've been...
nor have I. Okay, we can do... Maybe next month we'll do a review.
But the kind of the point is that everybody seemed to be really beating on it when it was, it's a terrible movie and everything.
Yeah, they were not good reviews,
and
were they?
Yet, when it hits the streaming services, if I remember correctly, this is the second or third week that it's, in the top 10. So somebody's watching it, somebody's enjoying it, and somebody's giving it positive feedback. So I have to wonder, are we really, I hate to say this, but are we seeing a bit of a death knell for theaters? Is going to the theater going to become not just a blockbuster movie experience, but is it going to become a much more special event than it used to be, Saturday night, let's go to the movies?
Oh, I think undoubtedly. I think Barbenheimer proved that. So I'm just looking at Argyle on Rotten Tomatoes. 72% audience score, a 33% tomato meter, which is, I believe, based on reviews. Listen, as someone that does paid for criticism, but of books, not movies, I obviously think everyone should listen to critics. But sometimes critics can pan things and viewers just find them fun. And a big, dumb, couple of hours long action movie from the people that made Jurassic World is fun. It stars Bryce Dallas Howard, who was in the Jurassic World franchise. Like, as you know, Chuck, I am very pro silly, dumb action movies and TV shows. Very much in favour. So, 2 hour, 19-minute movie in that kind of vein, why not?
This is another one of your platform positions for World Ruler.
Possibly. There will obviously be World Ruler subsidies for dumb action movies.
Good,
yeah,
good. Sure. It's good to know. That's another reason to vote for Charlotte Henry for a World Ruler.
Sure. But my serious point, Bryce Dallas has to say, in the Jurassic World series, she was. You got Matthew Vaughn, you got John Cena, you got Dua Lipa. It's just fun.
And
that's okay.
And have you looked outside recently? I mean, with what's going on in the world, we need fun. People are going to be attracted to fun.
I'm very pro-fun. I'm very pro-fun. I'm tell you what, here's a promise. You and I are going to watch it and talk about it in the May version of TV Plus Talk to see if we agree with the professional critics or the audience. I'm quite looking forward to settling down.
All right, that's fair. I will move that up my watch list. I will move it up my watch list.
Yeah, I think we will have fun with it. And I also think, and again, I slightly caveat this by saying I haven't watched it yet. One of the things I've criticised Apple TV Plus for, I think other people have noticed, is it sort of always took itself a bit too seriously, right? There was a few 30-minute comedies sprinkled in there, but generally it was all trying to be like HBO Max, high-end drama, very, very pretty stuff.
Yeah.
Which is lovely.
Yeah. But think about when Tim Cook introduced Apple TV Plus and, the big push that, we want to tell great stories. And the fun stuff is not always considered a great story.
Sure. But my point is that I think it's good if Apple is slightly, relaxing a bit and doing some fun, silly stuff as well. Agreed.
Here we go. Only 4 years old, Charlotte, in a world that is built on shifting sands. They're evolving and learning just like the rest of us.
Absolutely. Well, we'll be back next month to review Argyle, to see what services we've cancelled and resubscribed to. Chuck, where can people keep up with you?
You can find me at MacVoices.com. That's where I'm in the process of releasing some of the interviews I did at NAB this year, along with our other regular content. And on the socials, you can find me as @ChuckJoyner.
Wonderful. One year, I really have to fly out and hang out with you at NAB. I'm at Charlotte A. Henry across social media. Head over to theedition.net for blogs and newsletters and all that stuff on tech and media. There's the podcast as well. And we will see you next month.
Thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices, or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you Mac Voices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.